My name is Letitia Mark, and I am 32 years old. 2 months ago, I sat in the living room of my parents' custom-built ski chalet in Park City, Utah. The fire was dying down. My mother, Patricia, had dozed off in her wingback chair after another exhausting evening of playing the perfect matriarch. As I watched her sleep, her face shifted, her brow furrowed in genuine distaste. She murmured my name, Letitia. Then she said two more words: the disappointment. She sighed, her features relaxing back into a peaceful slumber. The room was quiet, except for the crackle of the embers. I looked across the coffee table at my older sister, Sarah. Our eyes locked. I waited for her to show shock, maybe offer a sympathetic grimace. Instead, Sarah raised her crystal glass, took a slow, deliberate sip of her Cabernet, and looked back at the fire. Her face was a blank slate. She knew. She had always known. That single, unapologetic sip of wine told me I had spent my entire life trying to win a game that was rigged against me from the start. But what my family did not realize was that their invisible, disappointing daughter was a forensic accountant. And the very skills they looked down on were the exact tools I would use to dismantle my father's real estate empire in front of 200 of his wealthiest investors. Before I explain how a single spreadsheet brought down Utah high society, please take a moment to like and subscribe to Eva Tells Stories, but only if you find satisfaction in watching the truth come to light. Drop a comment, letting me know your age, where you are watching from, and what time it is there right now. I always want to know who is sitting in the audience. Now let me take you back to that freezing December night in Park City. Growing up in the Mark family meant adhering to a strict set of traditional values, at least on paper. In our community, a pristine public image was currency. My father, Richard, was a prominent commercial real estate broker. My mother served on every charity board in the valley. Sarah, 2 years older than me, ran a curated lifestyle boutique downtown. She fit the brand. She had the highlighted hair, the flawless social media feed, and the effortless charm that my parents valued above all else. I was the outlier. I preferred ledgers to social galas. I chose a career in forensic accounting, digging through tax codes, a path my father called drab and uninspired. I worked 3 jobs to pay my way through a state college, while Sarah enjoyed fully funded ski trips to Switzerland. I accepted my role. I did their complex corporate taxes for free every spring because families help each other. I overlooked being cropped out of the annual holiday cards because the composition looked better with just the 3 of them. But watching Sarah sip her wine that night in the chalet, the puzzle pieces snapped together. My mother's subconscious cruelty was not a random slip. It was the echo of conversations they held when I was not in the room. We left the house 10 minutes later. Sarah offered to drive me back down the canyon to Salt Lake City. The roads were slick with black ice winding tight along the mountainside. I sat in the passenger seat of her Range Rover watching the headlights cut through the falling snow. For 20 miles, the only sound was the hum of the heater. My chest felt hollow tight with the kind of grief that comes from mourning people who are still alive. I waited for Sarah to bring it up. I waited for her to offer an excuse or an apology for our mother. She kept her eyes fixed on the road, her hands relaxed on the heated steering wheel. The drive down the canyon from Park City to Salt Lake City is treacherous in the dark. The roads wind tightly against the edges of the mountainsides where the snow falls in thick, heavy sheets. Inside my sister Sarah's Range Rover, the climate control hums a steady, quiet rhythm. The heated leather seats offer a deceptive physical comfort. The atmosphere inside the cabin, however, is colder than the black ice forming on the asphalt beneath our tires. For 20 miles we do not speak. The silence stretches between us, dense and suffocating. I sit in the passenger seat watching the reflective lane markers whip past in the blinding snow. My mind is still trapped in the living room we just left. I am replaying the image of our mother asleep in her custom wingback chair. I am hearing the casual, effortless way my own name slipped from her lips, followed by a title she clearly uses for me when I am not around. The disappointment. I keep waiting for Sarah to break the quiet. I expect her to reach across the center console to offer some kind of sisterly solidarity. After all, she sat right across from me. She heard the exact same words. The miles tick by and the silence remains unbroken. I realize Sarah is not going to offer any comfort. She is perfectly content to let me sit in my own fresh grief. I finally force myself to speak. My voice sounds thin and unsteady over the hum of the engine. I ask her if she can believe what just happened. I ask her how a mother could harbor that level of quiet resentment toward her own child. I lay my vulnerability bare in the dark space of the vehicle, hoping to find an ally. I look at her profile illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard gauges. I wait for her to validate the sharp sting radiating through my chest. Instead, Sarah does not even glance in my direction. She keeps her eyes fixed on the winding canyon road. Her manicured hands rest lightly on the steering wheel. She takes a slow, practiced breath and delivers a response that fundamentally fractures my understanding of our entire relationship. "Do not be dramatic, Tish," she says. Her voice carries a very specific regional tone. It is a sweet, gentle cadence perfected in local social circles designed to make cruelty sound like helpful advice. She did not mean it the way you are taking it. You have to admit you do make things difficult for them. You just do not fit the brand. She says this with the casual indifference of someone noting the weather. There is no evident anger in her delivery, which makes the words cut infinitely deeper. She believes what she is saying is simply an objective truth. The phrase hangs in the sterile air of the luxury vehicle. The brand. I stare at my older sister. I look at her designer winter coat draped elegantly over her shoulders. I look at her flawless hair that somehow defies the winter humidity. In that enclosed space, the entire hierarchy of the Mark family crystallizes before my eyes. For my entire life, I had believed Sarah was merely the lucky beneficiary of our parents' rigid favoritism. I thought she was just the easy child, the one who naturally aligned with their country club aspirations and their endless community networking events. I had always assumed my parents favored her because she reflected the image they wanted to project to the world. But her casual dismissal reveals a much darker, more intentional dynamic. Sarah is not an innocent bystander holding a golden trophy. She is the active architect of my isolation. The realization hits me in waves as the headlights cut through the descending storm. Sarah has spent her entire life reinforcing my role as the difficult outsider to ensure her own place on the pedestal. I think back to the myriad of times I was painted as the problem, and I suddenly see her fingerprints on every single narrative. When I was 19, working weekends at a local firm to pay my state college tuition, Sarah told my parents I was avoiding Sunday family dinners because I thought I was too smart for their traditions. When I turned 25 and politely declined a setup with the arrogant son of my father's business partner Sarah, whispered to my mother that I was deliberately trying to embarrass the family name. She took every instance of my independence and translated it into defiance for our parents to consume. She spent decades feeding them a storyline where I was the abrasive, ungrateful burden. She positioned me as the rebellious outlier so that her own obedience would look even more spectacular by comparison. She needed me to be the disappointment. My perceived failure was the dark, contrasting background she required to shine so brightly in their eyes. Even my career choice played into her hands. As a forensic accountant, I deal in hard numbers in ledgers and hidden assets. I uncover the truth beneath the surface. My parents built their lives on pristine surfaces. To them, my career is drab and uninspired. To Sarah, my career is a convenient excuse to exclude me from the glittering social events that define her existence. Yet she has no problem using my skills when it benefits her. For 6 years, I have prepared the complex corporate taxes for her lifestyle boutique entirely for free. When I point out discrepancies or warn her about her excessive spending, she runs to our father claiming I am being unsupportive and nitpicking her dreams. I do the work, I save them thousands in audit penalties, and I still remain the villain of the story. The vehicle descends out of the canyon and into the Salt Lake Valley. The grid of city lights spreads out below us, glowing softly through the freezing rain. I do not argue with her. I do not scream or cry or demand an apology for the breathtaking cruelty of her comment. That is what the old Letitia would have done. The old Letitia would have spent the rest of the drive trying to explain herself, trying to prove her worth, trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for her in the first place. Instead, I lean my head against the cold glass of the passenger window and let the silence stretch out again. This time, however, it is my silence. I am a forensic accountant, and my mind begins to work the way it was trained to work. I begin to audit my own life. I look at the emotional ledgers of the past 32 years, the deposits of my time, my energy, my free labor, and my desperate attempts to be loved. Then I look at the returns. The quiet insults, the exclusion, the deep-seated resentment whispering out of my mother in her sleep. The math does not lie. I have been operating at a massive emotional deficit for decades to keep these people comfortable. We navigate the downtown streets and finally pull into the parking lot of my apartment complex. The building is a simple brick structure, functional and unassuming. It stands in stark contrast to the gated estates and manicured lawns of the neighborhoods my family inhabits. Sarah shifts the vehicle into park but keeps the engine running. The headlights illuminate a patch of dirty gray snow on the sidewalk. She does not turn to look at me. "Get some rest, Tish," she says, her tone returning to that breezy, artificial warmth she wears like a second skin. "Do not overthink tonight. We have the charity luncheon next week, and Mom needs you to help balance the silent auction donation ledgers. I will text you the details." I unbuckle my seatbelt. I look at my sister, realizing I am seeing her clearly for the very first time. I am seeing the mechanisms of her manipulation. I am seeing the hollow core beneath the polished Utah facade. She expects me to show up next week. She expects me to sit in the corner with a calculator and clean up their financial messes while they take photographs and shake hands. She expects the dynamic to continue exactly as it always has, because I have never given her a reason to believe otherwise. I open the heavy door of the luxury vehicle and step out into the freezing night air. I do not say goodbye. I push the door closed, hearing the solid thud of the expensive engineering locking into place. I stand on the sidewalk and watch her red taillights disappear around the corner, melting into the city traffic. As the vehicle vanishes from my sight, a profound physical change occurs within me. The heavy, suffocating grief that had been sitting on my chest since we left the ski chalet simply evaporates. It lifts away into the winter air, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. I realize I have spent my entire life playing a rigged game designed by people who need me to lose. And I decide right there, standing in the icy driveway, to stop playing. I step inside my apartment and lock the door behind me. The silence in my own space feels entirely different from the suffocating quiet of my sister's vehicle. Here, the silence is safe. It belongs to me. I walk into the kitchen and turn on the overhead light illuminating my dining table, which is covered in client files, financial ledgers, and organized stacks of documentation. I run my fingers over the edge of a manila folder, feeling the rough texture of the paper. To truly grasp the magnitude of the shift that just occurred within me, you have to understand the long, quiet history of my devaluation. It did not happen overnight. It was a systemic, gradual erosion of my worth, executed with surgical precision by the people supposed to protect me. My father, Richard, deals in skylines. He is a titan of Utah commercial real estate. He operates in a world of glass office buildings, steel high-rises, and lucrative handshake agreements negotiated on manicured country club golf courses. To him, perception is reality, and image generates revenue. When I told him I intended to become a forensic accountant, he wrinkled his nose in visible distaste. He called the profession drab and uninspired. He suggested it was a path for people who lacked the charisma to create anything of their own. He did not understand that I was drawn to the numbers precisely because numbers never lie. They do not gaslight you. They do not smile to your face while plotting your demise. In my line of work, I track anomalies. I follow the flow of hidden assets, expose corporate embezzlement, and dismantle elaborate financial fraud. I find the truth buried beneath layers of carefully constructed deceit. My father despises my career because he thrives on the surface, while I am trained to dig underneath it. To illustrate the mechanics of my family dynamic, I have to recount the pebbles. The pebbles were the daily inequities, the small stones of rejection thrown at me throughout my youth. When we reached our early 20s, Sarah announced she needed to take time to find herself. In the Mark family, finding oneself apparently required a fully funded ski expedition to the Swiss Alps. My parents eagerly purchased her international flights, acquired top-tier designer winter gear, and provided a generous daily stipend. They subsidized her entire journey so she could post pristine, aesthetically flawless photographs of her alpine adventures to her growing social media following. During that exact same year, I was navigating my junior year at a local state college. I worked 3 separate jobs to cover my tuition and rent. I opened a campus coffee shop before dawn, breathing in the harsh scent of industrial espresso beans. I tutored struggling underclassmen in advanced statistics during the afternoon. I sat beneath buzzing fluorescent lights doing data entry for a medical clinic late into the night. My hands were constantly cramped, my eyes perpetually red from exhaustion. When I asked my parents for a tiny short-term loan to cover a sudden increase in the cost of my textbooks, my father delivered a stern lecture on the virtues of self-reliance. He claimed he was denying the funds to build my character. The most distinct pebble, however, was my college graduation. Earning my dual degree in accounting and finance required relentless, grueling sacrifice. I invited my parents to the commencement ceremony months in advance, hoping they would acknowledge the milestone. But Sarah had conveniently chosen that exact weekend to host the grand opening of her new lifestyle boutique in downtown Salt Lake City. The shop sold overpriced linen throws, imported artisanal candles, and decorative woven baskets. It was a pure vanity project, bankrolled from the ground up by Richard. Presented with a choice, my parents chose the boutique. They skipped my commencement ceremony to drink expensive champagne and pose for local lifestyle magazine photographers. I sat in a sea of identical caps and gowns, listening to thousands of names being called. When my turn arrived, I walked across the stage and looked up at the expansive bleachers. The empty seats assigned to my family echoed the specific brand of isolation I had endured my whole life. Those were the pebbles. Then came the boulders. The boulders were the heavy, unyielding obligations placed squarely upon my shoulders under the guise of traditional Utah family values. A certified forensic accountant, bills at a premium hourly rate, yet for 6 consecutive years, I operated as the invisible utility of the Mark family. I handled the complex corporate taxes for both my father's massive commercial brokerage and my sister's boutique entirely for free. Every spring, Richard would dump a chaotic, disorganized box of ledgers and fragmented financial statements onto my desk. He utilized convoluted shell companies and aggressive depreciation schedules that required meticulous, cautious unraveling. Sarah was infinitely worse. She treated her business accounts like a personal checking account. I would audit her ledgers and find receipts for luxury handbags, high-end salon retreats, and expensive dinners coded as marketing expenses. By commingling her funds, she was inviting the IRS to pierce the corporate veil. I spent countless sleepless nights reconciling their accounts, correcting their hazardous financial behavior, and shielding them from severe federal audit penalties. I saved them tens of thousands of dollars in professional fees. Whenever I hinted at the sheer volume and liability of this labor, my father would quickly invoke his favorite defense. He would place a heavy hand on my shoulder and declare that families help each other. He weaponized our cultural emphasis on kinship to extract my highly specialized expertise without offering a single dime of compensation or a word of genuine gratitude. I was summoned only to clean up their messes, to balance their fragile books, and to keep the machinery of their wealthy facade running smoothly. Yet despite serving as the structural integrity of their businesses, I remained visually erased from their public narrative. Every December, Patricia mailed out a glossy gold foil holiday photo card to a mailing list of 500 affluent community members. The card always featured Richard, Patricia, Sarah, and Sarah's husband, standing against the breathtaking backdrop of their Park City chalet, smiling in coordinated cashmere sweaters. I was never in the frame. The first time it happened, my mother claimed the photographer framed the shot poorly, and I was accidentally cropped out. The second time, she said my chosen outfit clashed with the aesthetic palette of the season. By the third year, she stopped inventing excuses and simply stopped telling me when the photo shoots were scheduled. I was the foundation they stood upon, buried safely underground, out of sight. Standing in my kitchen holding the edge of my dining table, I realize exactly how these toxic systems survive. Dysfunctional families do not just spontaneously generate. They are carefully constructed and meticulously maintained by everyone agreeing to the lie. The parents dictate the false narrative, the favored child enforces the rigid hierarchy, and the scapegoat internalizes the blame. The entire system requires the scapegoat to remain silent, to accept the pebbles, and carry the boulders without a single word of complaint. For 32 years, I upheld my end of that unspoken contract. I swallowed the subtle insults, I processed their dangerous taxes, and I stayed out of their glossy photographs. But Sarah's casual cruelty in the vehicle tonight severed the invisible strings controlling my compliance. Now that I understand the mechanics of their manipulation, my silence is officially over. I will no longer subsidize the illusion of their perfection. I finally go to sleep, my mind sharper and more unburdened than it has been in decades. The sun rises over the Wasatch Mountains, casting a bright, unforgiving light across the Salt Lake Valley. It is a Tuesday morning. My usual routine dictates a quiet cup of coffee and a methodical review of my daily caseload. But at exactly 7 o'clock, my phone shatters the quiet of the apartment. I glance at the caller ID. It is my father. Richard Mark never calls me directly, and he certainly never calls before normal business hours. He communicates through his executive assistant or delegates trivial messages to my mother. I stare at the glowing screen, sensing an immediate shift in the atmosphere. I answer the call. His voice lacks its usual booming theatrical authority. Instead, it sounds tight, breathless, and laced with an emotion I have never heard him direct toward me: panic. In a single frantic phone call, the pristine illusion of their limitless wealth begins to fracture, replaced by an unprecedented and staggering demand. The glowing screen of my phone cuts through the early morning shadows of my kitchen. Tuesday morning, 7 o'clock. The digital display on my coffee maker shifts from 6:59 just as the device vibrates against the granite countertop. I glance at the screen and see my father's name, Richard Mark. A tight knot of instinctual tension forms in my stomach, but the cold clarity I found in my sister's car the night before prevents the familiar wave of anxiety from washing over me. My father does not dial his own phone calls. He employs an executive assistant named Brenda, who manages his schedule with military precision. For Richard to bypass Brenda and dial my number before normal business hours indicates a severe disruption in his carefully ordered universe. I swipe the screen to accept the call. He does not offer a greeting. His voice sounds strained, clipped, and hollow, stripped of the booming theatrical resonance he reserves for closing multi-million-dollar property deals. He tells me to come to his downtown office immediately. He does not frame it as a request. It is a summons. He hangs up before I can ask a single question. I change into a tailored charcoal suit, pull my hair into a strict knot at the nape of my neck, and drive toward the city center. The Salt Lake City skyline reflects the pale morning sun against facades of steel and mirrored glass. My father's commercial brokerage occupies the top floor of the most prominent high-rise in the district. It is a monument to his success, designed to intimidate rivals and reassure wealthy investors. I navigate the underground parking garage, ride the private elevator to the penthouse suite, and walk past the empty reception desk. The heavy double doors to his personal office are slightly ajar. I step inside, and the sight before me instantly confirms that the flawless facade of the Mark family has suffered a profound structural failure. My mother, Patricia, and my sister, Sarah, are already sitting on the expansive Italian leather sofa situated across from Richard's mahogany desk. The visual impact of their appearance is striking. Patricia is a woman who would rather endure physical pain than be seen without a perfect blowout and pristine makeup. Yet this morning she is wearing wrinkled cashmere, her face pale, her posture slumping into the cushions. Sarah looks even worse. The golden child of Park City society is gripping a paper coffee cup so tightly her knuckles are white. Her designer coat is thrown carelessly over the armrest, and her eyes are rimmed in red. They look frantic, disheveled, and deeply afraid. I remain standing near the doorway, observing them with the detached scrutiny of a forensic auditor examining a compromised ledger. Richard stands behind his desk. He does not offer me a seat. He rests his weight on his knuckles, leaning forward with an expression that attempts to project authority, but betrays a fierce underlying desperation. He skips the customary pleasantries and launches directly into his pitch. He informs me that Sarah's boutique is experiencing a minor cash flow hiccup. The choice of terminology is almost laughable. A minor hiccup does not result in an emergency family summit at 7 in the morning. A hiccup does not strip my mother of her immaculate presentation. Richard paces to the window overlooking the snow-capped Wasatch Front and continues his monologue. He speaks about the turbulent retail market and unexpected vendor delays smoothing over the edges of whatever crisis has brought them here. He tries to paint a picture of a temporary inconvenient hurdle that merely requires a swift, quiet resolution. Then he turns back to me and drops the number, $150,000. He demands that I liquidate my private investment portfolio and transfer the funds to Sarah's business accounts by the end of the week. My breath catches in my throat, not out of fear, but out of sheer astonishment at his audacity. He knows exactly how much capital I possess, because he is a man who memorizes the financial vulnerabilities of everyone in his orbit. I built that portfolio through years of relentless, grueling labor. While Sarah was attending elite wellness retreats and purchasing imported inventory for her failing shop, I was living in a modest apartment, driving a 10-year-old sedan, and working agonizing hours. My father had mocked my profession, labeling it uninspired. Now he is demanding the entire harvest of my uninspired labor to bail out his favorite child. He does not call it a bailout, of course. He frames the demand using the exact traditional values he has always wielded as a weapon against me. It is a loan, he insists, a vital investment in the family name. Patricia chimes in from the sofa, her voice thin and reedy. She reminds me of the importance of community standing. She warns that if Sarah's boutique defaults on its obligations, the country club gossip will be devastating. We protect our own Letitia, my father declares, fixing me with a heavy, expectant stare. They are banking on my lifelong conditioning. They expect me to nod comply and drain my life savings out of a desperate, ingrained desire to finally earn their approval. They assume I will eagerly accept the role of the savior, exchanging my hard-earned security for a fleeting scrap of validation. The old version of me would have fallen right into the trap. I would have rushed to the bank, terrified of being labeled difficult and desperate to be valued. But the woman standing in this office is the one who woke up during that freezing car ride down the canyon. I look at my father demanding my money. I look at my sister, who mere hours ago told me I did not fit their brand. I look at my mother, who called me a disappointment in her sleep. My heart rate remains steady. My palms are dry. I feel a profound, chilling detachment. I do not cry. I do not shout. I do not list my grievances or demand an apology for their years of neglect. Instead, I lean into the very professional training they have spent decades dismissing. I fold my hands in front of me and look directly into my father's eyes. I tell him in a voice devoid of any emotional inflection that I am willing to consider providing the capital. A collective sigh of relief seems to shudder through the room. Patricia closes her eyes, and Sarah drops her head back against the sofa. But before Richard can offer a forced smile of paternal pride, I raise my hand to stop him. I state clearly that my consideration comes with a non-negotiable professional condition. I will only authorize the transfer of funds after I conduct a full independent audit of the boutique's financial ledgers. I require unrestricted access to the raw data. I want the unedited bank statements, the vendor invoices, the payroll records, and the digital transaction histories for the past 36 months. I tell them I will trace every dollar moving in and out of that business before I risk a single cent of my own equity. The reaction is instantaneous and visceral. The relief in the room evaporates. All the color drains from Sarah's face, leaving her looking pale and stricken. She drops her coffee cup onto the glass table, spilling dark liquid across the surface, but she does not even notice. She shoots a terrified, panicked glance at our father. Richard does not attempt to negotiate my terms. He does not offer a compromise or try to talk me down. His reaction is a fierce, explosive refusal. He slams his open palm against the heavy mahogany desktop with a crack that echoes like a gunshot. He raises his voice, barking harsh accusations about my lack of trust and my failure to demonstrate blind family loyalty. He claims my demand is an insult to my sister and a disgrace to our kinship. I stand perfectly still, watching his towering rage. His ferocious, unyielding rejection of a standard financial review tells me everything I need to know. If this were truly a minor hiccup caused by slow vendor payments, they would eagerly hand over the books to secure the cash. Their terror at the prospect of my scrutiny exposes the grim reality lurking beneath their panic. This is not a temporary shortfall. It is not an unfortunate market fluctuation. His refusal confirms the dark suspicion settling into my mind. This is a deliberate, desperate cover-up. I maintain my eye contact, holding the stillness of the room. I decline to hand over my life savings without unrestricted access to the boutique's ledgers. The rejection hangs in the sterile air of the penthouse office for a fraction of a second before the facade of the powerful patriarch shatters. Richard slams his open palms onto the polished wood of his mahogany desk. The sound cracks through the suite like a physical blow. He leans across the surface, his face flushed a dark, dangerous red, a stark contrast to his usual pristine corporate composure. He does not negotiate my terms. He does not offer a compromise or attempt to assuage my concerns. Instead, he launches into a relentless barrage of character assassination. He accuses me of harboring a deep-seated bitterness toward my older sister. He calls me jealous, petty, and determined to watch our family lineage fail. He claims I am using this moment of financial vulnerability to punish Sarah for her success and popularity. Patricia gasps from the sofa, pressing a hand to her chest, playing the role of the devastated mother witnessing a tragedy unfold. She shakes her head, murmuring about my lack of loyalty. Sarah simply stares at the floor, her shoulders trembling in a carefully curated performance of victimhood. I do not raise my voice to match my father's volume. I do not offer a defense against their wild accusations of jealousy. A trained forensic accountant knows that an explosive reaction to a standard audit request is the loudest confession a person can provide. Innocence invites scrutiny, while guilt demands blind trust. I turn my back on the three of them. I walk across the thick carpet, open the heavy double doors, and step out of the office. The click of the door closing behind me feels like a profound structural shift in the universe. It is the very first time in 32 years I have set a hard, undeniable boundary. I ride the elevator down to the parking garage in total silence. The descent takes 40 seconds. In that brief span, I realize I have just drawn a line they can never uncross. I get into my car and drive away, expecting a wave of conditioned guilt to wash over me. The guilt never arrives. Only a sharp, clear sense of relief takes its place. But in a community where reputation functions as currency, my family cannot simply accept my departure. To preserve their flawless image, they must control the narrative of my sudden absence. In the affluent circles of Salt Lake City and Park City, gossip is a highly refined art form. Information flows smoothly over charity luncheons, country club tennis matches, and Sunday church services. Within 3 days, my phone begins to buzz with incoming messages. The texts do not come from my parents or my sister. They arrive from extended relatives' aunts I see twice a year, cousins and old family friends. The tone of every message is identical, dripping with that specific regional brand of toxic concern. Aunt Carol texts me to say she is praying for my troubled heart. Cousin Bethany leaves a voicemail suggesting I seek counseling for my emotional outbursts. They ask if I am feeling all right. They suggest I take some time to rest away from the pressures of my job. It takes very little time to decipher the strategy Patricia and Sarah have deployed against me. They launched a coordinated whisper campaign through their extensive social networks. My mother is a master of weaponized sympathy. I can picture her sitting in the clubhouse lounge, lowering her voice to a theatrical whisper, telling her peers how deeply worried she is about her youngest daughter. The story they spin is a masterpiece of manipulation. They paint me as greedy, unstable, and ungrateful. They tell everyone that the pressures of my solitary drab career have finally broken my spirit. We are just so worried about Letitia's mental health, they murmur over iced teas and catered salads. They claim I suffered a sudden irrational breakdown in my father's office and refused to help my sister out of sheer spite. This narrative works flawlessly because it reinforces the established dynamic they have cultivated for decades. Sarah remains the besieged but graceful entrepreneur, while I am cast as the erratic, unreliable scapegoat. My exclusion is swift and total. I am quietly removed from the shared digital calendars. My name disappears from the family group chats where they organize holiday plans and share photos. The invitations to the mandatory Sunday dinners at the Park City Chalet cease entirely. For the first time since childhood, my weekends belong solely to me. The irony of the situation is staggering. I am a professional who uncovers financial deception for a living, a woman who built her own stability block by block without a single dime of their money. Yet to the polite society of our valley, I am now the tragic, unstable sister who lost her grip on reality. My closest friend Rachel urges me to defend myself. She sits in my kitchen drinking coffee and tells me I should post a public statement or call my aunts to set the record straight. I decline her advice. Defending myself to an audience committed to misunderstanding me is a pointless waste of resources. I know exactly how these toxic systems operate. If I protest their lies, they will point to my anger as further proof of my instability. If I try to explain the demand for a financial audit, they will accuse me of attempting to ruin Sarah's business out of profound jealousy. The only winning move in their engineered social war is to refuse to play the game. I endure the smear campaign in steady silence. I go to work, I review my case files, I water my houseplants, and I sleep deeply through the night. I decide to let them talk. Their whispered rumors cannot touch my bank accounts or impact my professional licenses. They can keep their Sunday dinners and their hollow country club prestige. I traded their conditional acceptance for my own peace of mind, and I consider it a phenomenal bargain. I settle into this new quiet existence, believing the storm has passed. I think the worst thing they can do is assassinate my character among people whose opinions I no longer value. I assume their panic in the office was merely about preserving Sarah's boutique from a mild local embarrassment. I figure they found another way to cover her debts, perhaps by liquidating some of Richard's assets or taking out a standard business loan. I underestimate the depths of their desperation and the utter lack of morality hiding behind their traditional family values. I believe I have successfully excised the toxicity from my life simply by walking away. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I walk down to the lobby of my apartment building to check my mail. The metal box contains a few utility bills, a flyer for a local grocery store, and a stiff white envelope. I pull it out and glance at the return address printed in stark, bold lettering. The breath leaves my lungs. It is a certified notice from the Internal Revenue Service. My forensic instincts kick into high gear immediately. I tear open the flap right there in the lobby, ignoring the neighbors walking past me. The document inside is not a standard tax update or a routine inquiry. It is a formal declaration of severe delinquency. My eyes scan the pages, reading the numbers and the legal terminology. It details a monumental commercial restructuring loan that is currently in default. The obligation is tied directly to my Social Security number. The betrayal is no longer just a bitter family dispute over a spoiled sister and a bruised ego. It crosses a devastating line into federal territory, revealing a deception so profound it threatens to destroy my entire future. I hold the stiff white envelope in my hand, standing in the quiet lobby of my apartment building. The return address, printed in stark, bold lettering, belongs to a major commercial lender. It is the specific division that handles federal small business guarantees. I do not have a commercial loan. I have never applied for a commercial loan. My personal finances are meticulous, ordered, and entirely free of debt. A cold, heavy sensation settles in my chest, but it is not the frantic flutter of panic. It is the chilling stillness of professional recognition. I recognize the format of this envelope. I have seen hundreds of them cross my desk during corporate audits. It is a formal notice of default and intent to accelerate. I walk up the stairs to my apartment, my steps slow and deliberate. I unlock the door, step inside, and drop my keys on the entry table. The silence of my home, usually a sanctuary, now feels like a holding cell. I carry the envelope to my kitchen counter, grab a sharp paring knife, and slice the thick paper open. I slide the documents out and unfold them under the bright overhead lights. The stark numbers printed in black ink demand immediate attention. The letter details a severe delinquency on a commercial restructuring loan. The past due balance alone is staggering, exceeding $100,000. The total principal is nearly 7 figures. And right there on the second page, listed as the primary guarantor, is my name, Letitia Mark. Alongside my name is my social security number, my previous home address, and a digital signature claiming to be mine. I stare at the paper. My mind attempts to reject the visual information, but my training overrides the denial. I am a forensic accountant. I do not rely on emotions, I rely on data. I leave the documents on the granite counter and walk to my home office. I boot up my laptop, my fingers moving over the keys with practiced mechanical speed. I log into my secured professional databases, bypassing the standard consumer credit bureaus and accessing the deep-tier financial tracking systems I use to investigate corporate fraud. I pull my own credit history, the detailed version that shows every hard inquiry, every origination code, and every associated routing number. The truth begins to unfurl across my monitor in rows of undeniable data. The reality is infinitely worse than a simple stolen credit card or a hijacked retail account. I follow the money, trailing the digital footprints backward from the lender to the origination source. The loan was executed 18 months ago. It was designated as a commercial lifeline, a high-risk restructuring package intended to consolidate severe business debt. The beneficiary of the loan is a registered limited liability company. I pull the state registration records for the entity. The registered agent is Sarah Mark. The business address matches her curated lifestyle boutique in downtown Salt Lake City. I sit back in my chair, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark room. Sarah's boutique did not merely experience a minor cash flow hiccup, as my father had claimed in his penthouse office. The business was a spectacular financial disaster. By digging into the public tax liens and vendor judgments filed against her entity, I can see the architecture of her ruin. For years, she had been hemorrhaging money. She funneled commercial revenue into her personal accounts to maintain her lavish lifestyle, funding her designer wardrobe, her luxury vehicles, and her endless string of elite social engagements. She treated her corporate accounts like an infinite personal slush fund, running the boutique into catastrophic insolvency. To prevent the shop from collapsing and exposing her failure to the judgmental eyes of Park City high society, she needed a monumental infusion of cash. But Sarah had ruined her own credit, and her business lacked the revenue to secure a legitimate lifeline. So my father intervened. Richard, the man who prided himself on traditional values and community standing, stepped in to shield his favorite child from the consequences of her own reckless vanity. I pull the digital signature audit trail from the loan origination documents. Federal regulations require lenders to log the IP address and the timestamp of every digital signature. I cross-reference the IP address recorded on the day the loan was finalized. The numerical sequence matches the dedicated server of Richard's commercial real estate brokerage. He executed the documents from his own private office. He typed my name, entered my social security number, and forged my consent. He leveraged his industry connections to push the paperwork through the underwriting department, bypassing the standard identity verification protocols. But a signature alone would not have been enough to secure a loan of this magnitude. The bank required collateral. I dig deeper, parsing the asset schedules attached to the loan agreement. What I find makes the air in my lungs turn to ice. The collateral listed is a private custodial trust account. I trace the account routing numbers to a wealth management firm. The documentation reveals that the trust was established 32 years ago upon my birth. It was created by my maternal grandfather, a man who passed away when I was a toddler. He funded the trust, intending for it to be released to me on my 30th birthday. Richard was designated as the primary custodian, tasked with managing the funds until I reached the appropriate age. My father never told me the trust existed. When I turned 32 years ago, there was no mention of an inheritance. He kept it hidden, leaving me to work grueling shifts at a coffee shop and struggle through state college, assuming I had no safety net. He hoarded the asset, knowing he controlled the custodial keys. And when Sarah's vanity project faced inevitable ruin, he did not hesitate. He pledged the entire corpus of my hidden inheritance to secure the fraudulent commercial note, saving her boutique and sacrificing my future in a single calculated stroke. The pieces of the puzzle snap together with sickening clarity. I think back to the frantic 7 o'clock meeting in his downtown office just weeks ago. I recall the disheveled appearance of my mother, the terror in Sarah's eyes, and the uncharacteristic desperation in my father's voice. They did not summon me to ask for a genuine loan to cover a temporary vendor delay. They summoned me because the bank had alerted them that the commercial loan was entering severe default. The automated system was generating the notice of delinquency, preparing to mail it to my registered address. They knew the certified letter was coming. They needed my $150,000 to pay the arrears, to bring the fraudulent account current, and to stop the bank from notifying me of the crime. When I demanded a full independent audit of Sarah's ledgers before handing over my savings, I inadvertently backed them into a corner. If I had audited the boutique, I would have immediately discovered the incoming loan disbursements and uncovered the identity theft. That is why Richard exploded with such ferocious anger. That is why he slammed his hands on the desk and accused me of trying to destroy the family. He was not insulted by my lack of trust. He was terrified of my professional competence. He knew that the moment I looked at the raw data, his entire empire of lies would crumble. They literally mortgaged my identity to maintain their picture-perfect Utah image. They fed me to the wolves to ensure Sarah could continue hosting champagne receptions and projecting flawless success to her country club peers. My family did not just consider me a disappointment or a difficult burden. They considered me an unthinking, unfeeling resource, a silo of assets to be plundered whenever the golden child required a rescue. The whisper campaign they launched afterward, the concerned texts from extended relatives, the quiet rumors about my mental instability, it was all a preemptive strike. They were laying the groundwork to discredit me. If I eventually discovered the fraud and attempted to speak out, the community would already view me as an erratic, bitter woman making wild accusations against her upstanding parents. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I sit in the quiet glow of my home office, processing the staggering weight of their betrayal. For a brief moment, a familiar pressure builds behind my eyes. The wounded child inside me, the girl who just wanted her parents to attend her college graduation, wants to weep. But I do not let the tears fall. Tears are a luxury for people who have a safety net. Tears will not restore my credit, retrieve my stolen inheritance, or clear my name from a federal delinquency notice. Crying will not hold Richard and Sarah accountable for their felonies. I close the database windows and shut down the laptop. I stand up and walk to the window, looking out over the city. The mountains loom in the distance, dark and indifferent. I need to handle this with the cold, calculated precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. I cannot fight a war against a man with Richard's resources using simple outrage. I need someone who understands the local terrain, someone who specializes in dismantling powerful men. I need a shark. I walk back to my desk and pick up my phone. I open my contacts and dial the direct line for Harrison Cole, the most ruthless and feared corporate litigator in Salt Lake City. Harrison Cole operates out of a sleek minimalist office on the top floor of a downtown Salt Lake City high-rise. He is known throughout the state as a predator, in a tailored suit, a man who speaks softly but carries a formidable arsenal of legal precedent. I sit across his polished slate desk and begin extracting files from my leather briefcase. I do not offer tears or emotional appeals. I offer exhibits. I lay the paper trail out before him with the clinical precision of a surgeon preparing an operating table. First, I present the forged loan origination documents, highlighting the digital signature claiming to be mine. Next, I slide over the federal IP logs. I explain how I traced the numerical sequence of the signature directly to the dedicated server of my father's commercial real estate brokerage. Richard was so arrogant, so accustomed to operating without oversight, that he did not even attempt to mask his digital footprint. He executed the fraud from the comfort of his own executive suite, leaving an undeniable trail of digital breadcrumbs leading right to his desk. Then I present the asset schedules proving the unauthorized leveraging of my hidden childhood trust. I detail the history of the account established by my late grandfather and hidden from me for decades. I show Harrison the routing numbers and the custodial transfer requests Richard authorized to pledge my inheritance as collateral for a high-risk commercial note. Finally, I place the reconstructed financial ledgers of Sarah's boutique onto the slate surface. I show Harrison exactly where the capital flowed after the lender dispersed the funds. The money did not go towards saving a struggling retail business. It did not pay vendors or cover outstanding lease obligations. I point to the highlighted transaction codes proving Sarah siphoned the corporate funds directly into her personal accounts. She used the stolen money to subsidize luxury vehicle leases, pay private country club dues, and fund designer shopping sprees. She treated a federal commercial loan secured by my stolen identity as her own personal lottery winning. Harrison reviews the paperwork in silence. He does not rush. He flips through the pages, tracking the numbers, tracing the flow of stolen capital, and verifying the IP addresses. He taps a silver pen against his legal pad. He looks up, and his expression is a mask of cold calculation. He lists the offenses with a chilling detachment that matches my own. Wire fraud, he states. Identity theft, grand larceny, breach of fiduciary duty. He sets the pen down and leans back in his leather chair. He tells me we have enough leverage to decimate my father's brokerage and seize my sister's assets. He assures me we can destroy them. Harrison assumes we will follow the standard playbook for affluent family disputes. He prepares to negotiate a quiet, highly lucrative settlement behind closed doors. He suggests we draft a demand letter forcing Richard to pay off the loan, restore the trust, and offer a significant financial penalty in exchange for my silence and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. I lean forward and correct his assumption. A private settlement is exactly what my father anticipates. Richard Mark has spent 4 decades making problems disappear with discreet checks and hushed conversations in back rooms. He buys silence to protect his pristine reputation. I explained to Harrison that for my family, their public image is their oxygen. It is the currency they use to navigate their elite circles. A quiet settlement allows them to maintain the illusion of their flawless Utah values. They would simply pay the money and then spin a new narrative to our community, painting themselves as the gracious victims of a greedy, estranged daughter who extorted them. I refuse to grant them that luxury. I have spent my entire life suffocating in the shadows of their curated perfection. The consequences of their crimes must fit the culture they worship. The reckoning must be inescapable, and it must be public. Harrison studies my face, recognizing a client who does not want mere compensation. I want a systemic dismantling. A slow, sharp smile touches the corners of his mouth. He agrees to the strategy. We spend the next 3 weeks building a flawless, airtight trap. The procedure is methodical and unforgiving. First, Harrison files preemptive fraud affidavits with the commercial lender and the Federal Guarantee Agency. We submit the irrefutable proof of the forged signatures, officially contesting the debt and shifting the liability squarely back onto Richard. The bank immediately flags the account, initiating their own internal fraud investigation. Next, we move on the custodial trust. Harrison secures an emergency injunction to freeze the compromised accounts. We build a legal wall around the remaining capital, cutting off my father's access and preventing him from moving any assets to cover his tracks. Richard is now financially paralyzed, but because the banking bureaucracy moves slowly, he is not yet aware that his access has been severed. Finally, we draft a devastating civil suit. The document is a masterpiece of legal destruction, detailing every aspect of the financial exploitation, the identity theft, and the breach of fiduciary duty. We name Richard, Patricia, and Sarah as co-defendants. We gather all the necessary filings, we prepare the exhibits, and we bind the dossiers. But we do not serve the papers. We hold them back, keeping our arsenal hidden in the dark. We need the right venue to spring the trap. We wait for an opportunity where Richard cannot control the narrative, hide the evidence, or buy his way out of the spotlight. The opportunity arrives on a brisk Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in thick gold foil. I walk down to the lobby of my apartment building to check my mail. Amidst the usual utility statements sits an oversized, heavy envelope. The return address, printed in elegant calligraphy, belongs to my parents. I break the wax seal and slide the contents out. It is an extravagant invitation to Patricia and Richard's 40th wedding anniversary gala. The venue is a highly exclusive, notoriously expensive ski resort in Park City. The guest list will undoubtedly include every wealthy investor, real estate developer, socialite, and community leader my parents spend their lives trying to impress. It is the paramount social event of their season. Tucked behind the formal card is a handwritten note from my mother. It is a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. She expresses a hope that I will do the right thing and join them for the evening. She notes that my father plans to make a special announcement regarding family unity. She ends the message with a stern warning, instructing me not to embarrass them. I read the note twice, holding the heavy cardstock in my hands. The audacity is staggering, but the strategy is clear. This invitation is the ultimate hubris trap. They believe that by surrounding me with the wealthiest, most judgmental members of our community, I will succumb to peer pressure. They intend to ambush me publicly. They likely plan to corner me in a private lounge after the speeches, surrounding me with influential family friends to force my compliance. They want me to sign a retroactive liability waiver or a post-dated consent form for the loan under the guise of saving the family name. They are banking on my lifetime of submission. They are counting on my ingrained fear of causing a scene. I take the invitation and the note back to my apartment. I scan the documents and email them directly to Harrison Cole. My phone rings 5 minutes later. Harrison has read the invitation. I can hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. They have built the stage, he says. They have gathered the audience. I look at the gold foil lettering shining under my kitchen lights. I tell Harrison to prepare the process server. I pull out my laptop and type a swift, definitive response to the RSVP email address listed on the card. I confirm my attendance. If my parents want an audience for their demonstration of family unity, I will make sure they get a show they will never, ever forget. The heavy cream cardstock sits on my kitchen counter, catching the morning light. The edges are gilded and the calligraphy flows across the front in sweeping, elegant loops. It is an invitation to a black tie gala celebrating the 40th wedding anniversary of Richard and Patricia Mark. The venue listed is one of the most exclusive luxury ski resorts in Park City, a place where the entry fee for a standard dinner could cover my rent for a month. I stare at the gold foil lettering, trying to reconcile the sheer audacity of this piece of mail with the reality of the past few weeks. My family is currently waging a silent, vicious war against me. My mother and sister have seeded the entire Salt Lake City social circuit with whispers of my sudden mental instability. They have systematically isolated me from extended relatives and mutual acquaintances, painting me as a bitter, erratic woman who turned her back on her kin. Meanwhile, my father has committed federal wire fraud, draining my hidden childhood trust to secure a commercial loan for Sarah's failing lifestyle boutique. We are locked in a high-stakes, invisible legal battle. Yet despite the forged signatures, the stolen funds, and the orchestrated character assassination, they have sent me a formal invitation to their paramount social event of the season. I turn the thick card over. Tucked behind the formal printed invitation is a smaller piece of stationery. It bears my mother's personal monogram. The message is handwritten in her familiar, sharp script. The ink presses deep into the paper, betraying the tension behind the elegant cursive. "We hope you will do the right thing and join us," it reads. "Your father has a special announcement regarding family unity. Do not embarrass us." I read those 3 sentences multiple times. To a stranger, the note might sound like the plea of a heartbroken mother seeking reconciliation. To me, it reads like a ransom demand. I have spent 32 years decoding the hidden language of the Mark family. Every phrase carries a specific weighted translation. Doing the right thing means abandoning my own boundaries and submitting to their authority. A special announcement regarding family unity means a staged public performance designed to reassure their wealthy peers that the Mark family brand remains untarnished. And "do not embarrass us" is the ultimate threat. It is a reminder of the cardinal rule that governed my entire childhood. The facade must be protected at all costs. I sit at my dining table and analyze the strategy behind this invitation. Why would Richard and Patricia want the daughter they are currently smearing as unstable to attend their most important public event? The answer reveals itself through the lens of forensic logic. My father is a man who builds empires on leverage. He does not invite liabilities into his inner circle unless he intends to neutralize them. He has invited 200 guests to this gala. The attendee list will comprise the elite tier of Utah high society, including commercial real estate developers, prominent investors, and influential community leaders. These are the very people Richard relies upon to maintain his wealth and his power. He is constructing the ultimate hubris trap. He knows I detest public confrontation. He remembers the time I was 22 years old, and he used a crowded country club dinner to force me into giving up my apartment lease. He had waited until dessert, smiled warmly for the surrounding tables, and quietly informed me that if I did not move back home, he would cut off my health insurance. He relied on my ingrained fear of causing a scene. He banked on my silence. He assumes that same dynamic still controls me today. Their plan becomes transparent. They intend to ambush me. They will not do it on the main ballroom floor. They will wait until the gala is underway, until the champagne is flowing and the string quartet is playing. Then Richard will orchestrate a moment to pull me aside. He will guide me into a private VIP lounge off the main hall. Patricia and Sarah will likely be waiting there, perhaps accompanied by a few high-status family friends to serve as social pressure. Once the door is closed, Richard will slide a document across a polished table. It will be a post-dated consent form for the commercial loan or a retroactive liability waiver. He will frame it as a necessary step to save the family from ruin. He will use the presence of their influential peers to box me in, expecting me to quietly sign my name and authorize his fraud to avoid a catastrophic public meltdown. They need my physical signature to legitimize the stolen funds before the commercial lender finalizes the fraud inquiry Harrison and I recently triggered. They are running out of time, and this black tie gala is their desperate final play. I gather the gold foil invitation and the handwritten note, sliding them into a clear protective folder. I drive downtown to the minimalist high-rise office of Harrison Cole. The Salt Lake City streets are dry, but the air carries the bitter chill of impending winter. I walk into the conference room and place the pristine cardstock onto Harrison's slate desk. I watch his eyes scan the elegant calligraphy and then drop to my mother's sharp handwriting. Harrison reads the note twice. He does not speak immediately. He taps his silver pen against his legal pad, processing the tactical implications of the document. When he finally looks up, his expression reflects the clinical satisfaction of a predator catching the scent of a wounded target. They are accelerating their timeline, he states, his voice low and precise. The bank received our preemptive fraud affidavits last week. The compliance department has likely issued a preliminary notice of inquiry to your father's brokerage. Richard knows the financial walls are closing in. He needs a cure for the default and he needs it executed on paper. I explain my theory about the private lounge ambush. I describe my father's historical reliance on social intimidation to enforce compliance. I tell Harrison that Richard intends to use the sheer weight of 200 wealthy judgmental guests to crush my resistance. He expects me to revert to the quiet, obedient scapegoat who prioritizes the family reputation over her own survival. Harrison leans back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. It is a bold strategy, he admits. It relies entirely on their assumption that you are still the woman you were a year ago. It assumes you still fear their disapproval more than you value your own freedom. He looks directly at me, his gaze assessing my resolve. How do you want to handle this, Letitia? We can decline the invitation. We can serve the civil suit to his office tomorrow morning and let the litigation proceed through the standard channels. You do not have to walk into their arena. I look at the gold foil shining under the recessed office lights. For over 3 decades, my parents and my sister controlled the narrative of my life. They cropped me out of photographs, they dismissed my career, they stole my inheritance, and they attempted to convince our entire community that I was losing my mind. A quiet, standard legal proceeding would hold them financially accountable, but it would not address the core injustice. Richard Mark cares about his public image above all else. He values his standing in front of those 200 investors more than he values his own daughter. To truly balance the ledger, the consequences of his actions must be delivered in the very currency he worships. I reach across the slate desk and pick up the RSVP card. I pull a black pen from my purse. If I decline the invitation, I allow them to maintain control of the stage. If I stay home, they will stand at the podium and spin a tragic story about my absence, further fueling their whisper campaign. I refuse to give them that power. I uncap the pen and press the tip against the thick paper. I tell Harrison that we are not going to decline. I tell him that if my father has gone to the trouble of assembling the most influential people in our state for a demonstration of family unity, it would be incredibly rude to disappoint him. I check the box confirming my attendance. I write my name in clear, steady print. Harrison watches me seal the small response envelope. A rare, sharp smirk touches the corners of his mouth. He recognizes the shift in the power dynamic. Richard and Patricia believe they have built the perfect trap to force my submission. They do not realize they have actually constructed the ideal venue for their own unmasking. I ask Harrison to coordinate with the private process server. We discuss the logistics of the venue, the timing of the speeches, and the exact moment to deploy our arsenal. I leave the office and drop the sealed RSVP card into a blue postal collection box on the street corner. The metal door clangs shut with a definitive, satisfying sound. I walk back to my car, feeling the crisp Utah air against my face. The fear that once dictated my every interaction with my family is entirely gone. In its place is the cold, clear anticipation of an auditor preparing to present the final devastating report. I have RSVP'd yes. If they want an audience, I will make sure they get a show they will never, ever forget. The 7 days preceding the anniversary gala unfold as a study in contrasting realities. Across the Salt Lake Valley, my mother Patricia orchestrates her crowning social achievement with the intensity of a military general commanding a battlefield. Through the grapevine of local vendors and mutual acquaintances, I hear the exhausting details of her preparations. She demands imported orchids flown in overnight to ensure the floral arrangements mirror the exact shade of her custom table linens. She coordinates intricate ice sculptures and argues with caterers over the vintage of the champagne intended for the cascading fountain. For Patricia, the event is not a celebration of a 40-year marriage. It is a highly publicized defense of the Mark family brand. She is polishing the armor, unaware that the foundation has already crumbled. While she obsesses over the aesthetic details, Harrison Cole and I finalize the tactical execution of our legal strike. Our preparation occurs in the quiet, sterile environment of his downtown conference room, far removed from the glittering distractions of high society. We do not arrange flowers. We assemble devastating financial dossiers. I sit beside Harrison, organizing the raw data I pulled from the commercial lender and the federal IP logs. Each dossier is bound in a stark black folder. Inside the pages detail the unassailable proof of my father's identity theft, the leveraged childhood trust, and the fraudulent wire transfers funneling capital directly into my sister's failing boutique. I meticulously redact my own sensitive personal information, leaving only the glaring, undeniable evidence of Richard's felony exposed for his investors to read. To deliver these documents, we require a mechanism that circumvents my father's fierce control over the venue. Richard will undoubtedly instruct his hired security team to monitor the guest list, barring anyone who looks out of place. Harrison introduces me to a private process server named Elias. Elias is a man who specializes in infiltrating exclusive spaces. He does not wear a cheap suit or carry a conspicuous briefcase. Instead, we arrange for him to bypass the front doors entirely. Harrison leverages a contact within the resort management to secure Elias a temporary position on the catering staff for the evening. We map out the blueprint of the grand ballroom, identifying the exact positions of the tables reserved for Richard's paramount investors and corporate board members. Elias will blend seamlessly into the background, pouring wine and clearing plates until the precise moment arrives to serve a very different kind of course. With the legal trap securely primed, I shift my focus to my own role in the impending ambush. For 32 years, my mother curated my wardrobe to ensure I remained a background character in her visual narrative. Whenever we attended a community function or posed for a holiday portrait, Patricia handed me garments in drab muted shades of beige, slate, and navy. She claimed those colors suited my complexion. In truth, she engineered my invisibility, guaranteeing that Sarah always drew the eye in vibrant crimsons and striking sapphires. I was designed to fade into the wallpaper. I drive to a high-end boutique in a neighboring district, deliberately choosing a store that competes with Sarah's failing shop. I walk past the racks of neutral business attire and select a floor-length evening gown in a shade of brilliant emerald green. The fabric is heavy silk, cut with a sharp architectural elegance that demands attention. I try it on in the dressing room and stare at my reflection. The rich jewel tone transforms my entire presence. I do not look like the exhausted forensic accountant who works late into the night. I do not look like the scapegoat daughter desperate for a scrap of parental approval. I look like a woman holding a royal flush. I purchased the dress, the matching heels, and a structured evening clutch large enough to hold my own copies of the bank affidavits. I leave the store feeling a profound sense of reclamation. The evening before the gala, I sit in a quiet corner booth of a local coffee shop with my closest friend, Rachel. Rachel has witnessed the silent, grueling toll my family extracted from me over the past decade. She watched me navigate the rigorous college shifts, the skipped graduations, and the subtle daily rejections. She stirs her tea, watching me with a mixture of deep anxiety and quiet awe. Her hands fidget with her napkin while mine rest perfectly still on the wooden table. "Are you ready to blow up your life?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. She glances around the cafe as if my parents' spies might be lurking in the shadows. I trace the rim of my ceramic mug, feeling the residual heat of the dark roast coffee. I look at Rachel and offer a calm, steady smile. "I am not blowing it up," I reply. "I am just turning on the lights so everyone can see the rot." The truth of that statement settles between us. For the first time in my memory, I experience a total absence of anxiety. The crushing, suffocating fear of displeasing my father, the desperate yearning for my mother's validation, the quiet resentment of my sister's endless entitlement, none of it exists anymore. The lifelong conditioning that kept me tethered to their toxic hierarchy has been severed. I do not feel anger. Anger implies a loss of control. I feel the icy, unshakable resolve of an auditor who has already verified the math. The ledger is about to be balanced. Saturday evening arrives, bringing a bitter, biting cold to the Utah mountains. I dress in my apartment, moving through the motions with clinical precision. I slip into the emerald gown, step into the heels, and gather my structured clutch. I walk out to my car and begin the drive up Parley's Canyon. The journey ascends thousands of feet into the Wasatch Range, leaving the sprawling grid of Salt Lake City behind. The sun begins to set as I navigate the winding canyon road. The dying light hits the snow-capped peaks, casting long, jagged shadows across the pine forests. The sky shifts from a pale, icy blue to deep bruised shades of violet and gold. The heater in my car hums a quiet, steady rhythm, pushing back against the freezing mountain air pressing against the glass. I watch the elevation markers tick upward, approaching the elite enclave of Park City. I reach the summit and turn toward the sprawling luxury resort. The venue sits against the dramatic backdrop of the ski slopes, its timber and stone architecture glowing with warm, inviting light. A line of expensive vehicles stretches toward the grand portico, where valets in tailored winter coats scramble to open doors for arriving guests. The sheer wealth radiating from the building is designed to intimidate, to remind outsiders of their lower status. I pull my vehicle into the valet lane, shifting the transmission into park. A young attendant opens my door, offering a polite, rehearsed greeting. I step out into the freezing mountain air, feeling the chill bite against my bare shoulders. I hand him my keys and turn toward the towering wooden doors of the resort. I adjust my emerald dress, lift my chin, and step out of the shadows. I walk forward, ready to enter the glittering lion's den. The grand ballroom of the luxury ski resort stands as a sprawling monument to Utah high society. Stepping through the towering double doors, I am immediately enveloped by the suffocating atmosphere of curated perfection. Crystal chandeliers hang from the vaulted cedar ceilings, casting a warm, prismatic glow over 200 guests. The air carries the heavy mingled scents of expensive floral centerpieces and top-tier designer perfumes. A live string quartet plays in the far corner, their classical music providing a sophisticated soundtrack to the quiet clinking of champagne flutes. Every detail in this room has been meticulously designed by my mother to project an image of impenetrable wealth and flawless moral standing. It is a breathtaking display of financial illusion. I look around the cavernous space and see the very people my father relies upon to maintain his brokerage empire. Wealthy real estate developers, prominent local politicians, and elite investors mingle near the open bars. They wear tailored tuxedos and floor-length designer gowns, unaware that the lavish celebration they are attending is being bankrolled by a precarious house of cards. I enter the room without making a sound, but my presence registers almost immediately. For decades, I was conditioned to fade into the background. I was the drab utility character dressed in muted tones of slate and beige, meant to serve as a contrasting shadow to my sister's vibrant spotlight. Tonight, I step into the light. The emerald green silk of my evening gown catches the illumination from the chandeliers. The bold jewel tone is a direct rejection of the invisible role they assigned me. As I walk across the perimeter of the dance floor, heads begin to turn. The shift in attention is subtle at first, a few side glances over the rims of crystal glasses. Then the whispers begin. I pass a cluster of extended relatives standing near a towering ice sculpture. My father's sister, Aunt Carol, leans close to a family friend, shielding her mouth with a manicured hand. I do not need to read her lips to know the exact narrative she is sharing. She is reciting the script my mother and sister spent the last 2 weeks planting throughout their social circles. She is telling them about my sudden tragic instability. She is whispering about how the pressures of my solitary career finally broke my mind, causing me to lash out at my generous, loving family. In this elite community, female hysteria is a very convenient and easily accepted cover story. It protects the patriarchal authority of men like my father and preserves the aesthetic harmony of the group. The guests look at me with a mixture of polite pity and morbid curiosity, expecting to see a fragile, erratic woman on the verge of a public breakdown. I do not give them the satisfaction of looking away. I keep my chin elevated and my posture straight, offering calm, composed smiles to the people who are actively spreading rumors about my sanity. My serene demeanor causes ripples of confusion among the whispering ants. They expected a crumbling victim, not a woman radiating the cold, steady confidence of a predator. My eyes scan the room and quickly locate my sister. Sarah is holding court near the center of the ballroom, wearing a custom beaded gown that surely cost more than a standard vehicle. She is standing beside her husband David, entertaining a highly influential group of his real estate investors. These are the men whose capital keeps both David's firm and my father's commercial brokerage afloat. Sarah is in her element, laughing delicately and touching the arms of the wealthy developers, playing the role of the charming, successful boutique owner. Then her gaze sweeps past the catering staff and lands directly on me. The transformation in her face is instantaneous and revealing. The practiced socialite smile drops from her features, replaced by a sharp, rigid mask of alarm. She takes in the emerald dress, the steady posture, and the sheer defiance of my attendants. She realizes in a fraction of a second that the sister she spent years tearing down is not hiding in an apartment, drowning in shame. Sarah excuses herself from the circle of investors with a tight, forced nod. She turns on her heel and begins weaving rapidly through the crowd, scanning the room for our father. The panic in her movements is palpable. She finds Richard standing near the head table and leans in to whisper urgently in his ear. Richard turns his head, tracking Sarah's line of sight until his eyes lock onto mine. From across the expansive ballroom, I can see the sudden tension gripping his jaw. He excuses himself from a conversation with a local politician and begins to march in my direction. He moves with purposeful, predatory speed, navigating the sea of evening gowns and tuxedos. He keeps a pleasant, frozen smile plastered on his face for the benefit of the surrounding guests, but his eyes are dark and unyielding. He is the patriarch moving to neutralize a threat to his kingdom. I stand my ground near a marble pillar, holding a glass of sparkling water. I do not retreat as he approaches. Richard reaches me, and without a word of greeting, he clamps his large hand around my left elbow. His grip is rough and punishing, a physical assertion of control meant to intimidate me into submission. He pulls me hard, pulling me away from the open floor and into the slight shadow of the pillar. He leans in close, his face mere inches from mine. "You actually showed up," he hisses. His voice is pitched low, a dangerous rumble designed to stay beneath the sophisticated music of the string quartet. He ensures the wealthy investors standing just a few yards away cannot hear the venom in his tone. "I expected you to stay home and save yourself the embarrassment, but since you decided to walk in here, you will follow my instructions." I look down at his hand gripping my arm. I can feel the pressure of his fingers bruising the skin beneath the green silk. I do not wince. I document the action in my mind, analyzing his desperation. He is terrified. The foundation of his wire fraud is crumbling, and he needs my signature to reinforce the load-bearing walls. "I expect you to smile," he orders, his grip tightening. "I expect you to keep your mouth shut and speak to no one. You will stand in the back during the toasts. After I finish my speech, you will walk quietly to the private VIP lounge down the hall. Your mother and I will meet you there. We have some standard paperwork that requires your immediate signature to resolve that little misunderstanding regarding the accounts. Do you understand me, Letitia? You will sign the forms, and you will not ruin your mother's night." He lays out the exact ambush I predicted. He confirms every single aspect of the trap Harrison and I anticipated. He intends to use the psychological weight of this 200-person gala to corner me in a secluded room, shoving a retroactive consent form in my face. He believes the sheer terror of causing a public scene will override my sense of self-preservation. He expects me to sign away my stolen inheritance and legitimize his felony just to secure his approval and escape his wrath. I look away from his gripping hand and raise my eyes to meet his furious stare. The silence stretches between us, a distinct boundary line drawn in the middle of the crowded ballroom. I do not shrink. I do not apologize. I brace my forearm and pull my elbow out of his grasp with a sharp, decisive motion. The sudden resistance surprises him, causing his hand to drop to his side. I take a slow, deliberate step back, reclaiming my physical space. I reach down and smooth the emerald silk of my dress, erasing the wrinkles left by his fingers. I look at the man who forged my name and mortgaged my identity to fund a lie. I would not dream of missing your speech, Dad, I say. My voice is perfectly level, betraying zero emotion. It is the precise, even tone of an auditor verifying a catastrophic deficit. I am looking forward to hearing every single word. Richard studies my face, searching for a trace of the familiar submission he has exploited for decades. My calm demeanor confuses him, but his overwhelming hubris blinds him to the danger. He misinterprets my serene response as compliance. He assumes the expensive dress is just a desperate final plea for his attention, and that my level voice indicates I have accepted defeat. He believes his physical intimidation and his strict orders have successfully subdued the rebellious daughter. He offers a curt, satisfied nod. "See that you do," he whispers. He turns his back on me and begins to walk toward the main stage at the front of the ballroom. He straightens his tuxedo jacket, adjusting his cuffs and reinstating his charming public smile as he prepares to address his wealthy peers. He walks with the supreme confidence of a man who believes he has manipulated every variable and secured his empire. As he reaches the steps of the stage and reaches for the microphone, he has no idea he has just stepped directly into the center of the snare. He walks forward thinking he has won, entirely unaware that he has just locked the door to his own trap. The clinking of crystal champagne flutes fades into a hushed murmur as my father ascends the 3 carpeted steps to the main stage. The live string quartet draws their bows across their instruments for one final lingering chord before packing their sheet music away. Richard Mark steps up to the polished acrylic podium. He adjusts the lapels of his tailored tuxedo jacket and taps the microphone twice. The sharp, rhythmic thumping echoes off the vaulted cedar ceilings of the grand ballroom, instantly commanding the attention of the 200 affluent guests. This is his domain. He has spent 4 decades cultivating a commanding presence, honing the ability to silence a packed room simply by clearing his throat. He begins his speech with the practiced cadence of a seasoned politician. He welcomes the real estate developers, the local politicians, and the venture capitalists who fuel his commercial brokerage empire. He weaves a captivating narrative about his 40-year marriage to my mother, painting a picture of unwavering devotion and shared sacrifice. He transitions smoothly into his favorite topic, which is the formidable legacy of the Mark family name. He speaks at length about our deep roots in the Utah community, leaning heavily into the regional cultural expectation of pristine traditional values. He talks about building a foundation of trust and how the strength of a thriving community relies entirely on the unbreakable bonds of kinship. Listening to him speak, I feel a profound sense of clinical detachment. I process his monologue the same way I analyze a fraudulent corporate tax return. Every word is a calculated misdirection. He uses terms like loyalty and sacrifice to describe what is in reality systemic financial exploitation. Growing up, Richard equated financial obedience with moral virtue. He funded Sarah's extravagant lifestyle and her failing boutique under the guise of empowering his family, but it was always about protecting his own optics. He denied my requests for basic educational support because my pursuit of a forensic accounting degree did not yield immediate social currency for his brand. His entire speech is a beautifully constructed ledger filled with falsified emotional entries. "We are only as strong as our loyalty to one another," he projects his baritone voice, filling the expansive room. "We must protect our own. We must be willing to set aside our personal comforts to ensure the legacy we leave behind remains untarnished for the next generation." The audience hangs on his every word, nodding in solemn agreement. They are captivated by the illusion of his patriarchal benevolence. Then Richard shifts his posture, leaning slightly over the podium. He lowers his voice, adopting a tone of gentle paternal concern. He scans the sea of designer evening gowns and tailored tuxedos until his eyes find me standing near the marble pillar at the back of the room. My youngest daughter, Letitia, has struggled recently to understand this fundamental truth, he announces. A collective inhale ripples through the ballroom. 200 pairs of eyes turn in my direction. The guests pivot in their plush chairs, their expressions a mixture of polite shock and morbid fascination. They have all heard the whisper campaign my mother and sister orchestrated over the past 2 weeks. They have been primed to view me as a fragile, unstable woman, grappling with a sudden mental decline. Richard is playing directly to that manufactured narrative. He is casting himself as the patient, long-suffering father, guiding his erratic child back to the light. She has faced some personal challenges that clouded her judgment. He continues, his gaze locked onto mine. But families do not abandon their own when the path gets dark. Families guide each other home. Tonight, Letitia is going to make a commitment to family unity. She is going to remind all of us what it means to heal. He extends his right hand toward me, palm open, an invitation that is actually a strict command. He gestures for me to join him on the stage. The sheer psychological manipulation of the moment is staggering. He is attempting to emotionally hijack me in front of the town's elite. In this specific cultural enclave, defying a parent in a public forum is an unforgivable taboo. He is weaponizing the presence of his wealthy investors, using their collective judgment to crush my free will. He fully expects the crushing pressure of the spotlight to shatter my boundaries. He anticipates that I will crumble under the weight of tradition, walk up to the stage, and offer a tearful public display of submission. Once he secures my public compliance, he plans to usher me into the private VIP lounge and shove the retroactive liability waiver into my hands. He needs my signature to cover up the forged commercial loan, and he is using this lavish anniversary gala as the anvil to forge my consent. The ballroom erupts into polite, encouraging applause. The guests clap their hands, expecting a heartwarming display of family reconciliation. They want a neat, tidy resolution to the rumors they have been discussing over their catered dinners. I look toward the front table where my mother Patricia sits. She is glowing with a triumphant, radiant energy. She dabs the corner of her eye with a crisp linen napkin, performing the role of the relieved matriarch perfectly. A few yards away, Sarah stands beside her husband David. Sarah holds a crystal glass of sparkling water, her lips curved into a smug, victorious smirk. She thinks she has won. She thinks the unruly scapegoat has finally been broken and brought to heel to clean up her financial disaster. I step away from the marble pillar. The emerald green silk of my evening gown glides over the polished hardwood floor. I begin the long walk down the center aisle of the ballroom. The applause sustains its steady rhythm, providing a surreal soundtrack to my descent into the lion's den. I do not lower my head. I do not avoid the stares of the developers, the socialites, or the extended relatives. I meet their gazes with a steady, unblinking focus. I can hear the faint rustle of expensive fabric and the soft murmurs of approval as I pass each table. They perceive my calm demeanor as a sign of surrender. They mistake my icy resolve for humble compliance. Every step I take feels lighter than the last. The invisible burdens I carried for 32 years slip from my shoulders. I am not the invisible utility they use to balance their checkbooks. I am a woman holding the irrefutable evidence of a federal crime. I walk past the lavish floral arrangements and the cascading champagne fountains, finding grim humor in the fact that my stolen childhood trust fund is subsidizing this very spectacle. As I approach the front of the room, the details of my father's physical state become clear. Despite his booming voice and his commanding posture, the stress of his impending federal exposure betrays him. I notice the rapid pulse jumping at the base of his neck. I see the fine sheen of perspiration gathering near his hairline. His knuckles are white where they grip the edges of the acrylic podium. He is a man staring down the barrel of a severe delinquency notice, terrified that his wire fraud is about to be discovered by the very people applauding him. He desperately needs me to play my assigned role. I ascend the 3 carpeted steps to the stage. The glare of the overhead spotlights hits my face, but I do not flinch. Richard steps out from behind the podium, stepping forward to embrace me. He opens his arms wide, intending to pull me into a suffocating performative hug for the cameras capturing the event. I stop walking. I plant my feet firmly on the wooden stage, maintaining a deliberate physical distance between us. His arms drop awkwardly to his sides. His confident smile falters for a fraction of a second before he attempts to recover his composure. He clears his throat and reaches for the microphone, resting in the stand. "We are so proud of you, Letitia," he says, his voice tight with underlying warning. He holds the microphone out to me, offering me the chance to deliver the tearful apology he has orchestrated. I reach out and take the cold metal cylinder from his hand. The weight of the device feels grounding in my palm. The applause in the room gradually fades into a hushed, expectant silence. 200 guests lean forward, waiting for the prodigal daughter to express her profound gratitude and beg for forgiveness. I do not look at my mother sitting at the front table. I do not look at my sister smirking in the crowd. I look out at the sea of expectant faces, the investors, the bankers, the very individuals whose capital sustains my father's fraudulent empire. I hold their collective attention, taking a slow, deep breath of the chilled, conditioned air. The anxiety that controlled the first 3 decades of my life is entirely absent. I turn my body, slowly pivoting away from the audience to face my father directly. He stands merely 2 feet away, his eyes wide with a sudden dawning realization that I am not following his script. The panic he has been suppressing all evening finally breaches the surface of his expression. I raise the microphone to my mouth. I keep my voice perfectly level, stripping away any trace of anger or hesitation. My words echo through the silent, vaulted room, cutting through the illusion of his pristine Utah facade with forensic precision. I am not signing your cover-up. I let those 6 words hang in the air for exactly 3 seconds. The silence in the ballroom is absolute. It is the kind of quiet that precedes a catastrophic failure, the structural groan of a building right before the roof caves in. I watch my father's triumphant smile instantly decay into a raw, visceral panic. The polished mask of the Utah patriarch slides off, revealing a terrified man who has just lost control of the narrative he spent 40 years building. He steps toward me, his large hands grasping empty air. He leans in close, attempting to bridge the physical gap I deliberately created. "Letitia, put the mic down," he hisses. His voice is a frantic, breathless whisper intended only for my ears. He thinks he can still salvage the situation. He believes he can bully me into submission right here on his stage. I do not yield. I do not flinch. I take another measured step backward, maintaining my distance. I keep the microphone raised near my mouth, ensuring every sound I make is amplified across the vast vaulted room. The 200 affluent guests sit perfectly still, their champagne flutes arrested in midair. "My father talks beautifully about family sacrifice," I announce to the silent crowd. My voice carries clear and steady, free from the tremor of fear that used to define my interactions with him. I do not shout. I speak with the calm, unhurried cadence of a professional delivering an audit report. What he actually means is financial exploitation. The guests exchange startled, sideways glances. This is not the heartwarming reconciliation they were promised. This is a public unmasking. The commitment he wants me to make tonight, I continue my words echoing off the crystal chandeliers, is not about healing. It is a desperate attempt to secure a retroactive signature. He invited me here to ambush me in a private room and force my consent to cover up a staggering federal crime. My father lunges again, his face flushed an ugly, mottled red. He tries to grab my wrist to physically wrest the microphone from my grip. "Stop this!" he barks, his voice loud enough now for the front tables to hear. "You are ruining the evening." I twist my arm out of his reach. My training kicks in, analyzing his movements, tracking his desperation. He is trying to silence the truth, but the truth is already out of the box. To fund my sister Sarah's lavish lifestyle, I project my voice, filling the cavernous space my father forged my signature. He stole my identity. He leveraged a childhood trust fund I did not even know existed to take out an illegal commercial restructuring loan. The principal amount is nearly $1 million, and the past due balance exceeds 100,000. Gasps ripple through the room like a sudden gust of wind across a still lake. The real estate developers, the local politicians, the wealthy investors, they are all listening now. They understand the gravity of the terms I am using. Fraud, forgery, illegal leveraging. These are not family squabbles. These are felonies. At the front table, my mother Patricia collapses back into her chair. Her hands fly to her mouth, her perfectly applied makeup stark against her sudden pallor. She looks like a woman who has just watched her empire burn to the ground. But it is Sarah who breaks the paralysis. The golden child, the beloved boutique owner, cannot handle the exposure of her financial ruin. She abandons her curated elegance and lunges from her seat. She practically runs down the center aisle, her custom beaded gown swishing furiously around her ankles. Her face is contorted with a vicious, unvarnished rage. She is lying. Sarah shrieks, pointing a manicured finger at me. Her voice is shrill and hysterical, slicing through the shocked murmurs of the crowd. She is having a mental breakdown. Do not listen to her. We told you she was unstable. She is just jealous and bitter. Sarah plays the only card she has left. She attempts to activate the whisper campaign she and my mother spent 2 weeks cultivating. She tries to paint me as the erratic scapegoat, desperately hoping the audience will dismiss my claims as the ravings of a disturbed woman. It is a classic manipulation tactic designed to discredit the source when the evidence cannot be refuted. I do not shout back. I do not engage in a screaming match with my sister. That is what they expect. They expect a messy, emotional confrontation that they can later spin as proof of my instability. I refuse to give them the performance they desire. I look down at Sarah standing at the foot of the stage, her face red and contorted. Then I look out at the sea of affluent guests watching the spectacle unfold. I reach into my structured emerald clutch, holding the microphone steady with my other hand. My fingers close around the thick stack of documents I prepared with Harrison Cole. I pull the papers out and hold them up under the glare of the spotlights. The heavy stock paper is stamped with the official seals of the commercial lender and the Federal Guarantee Agency. The stark black redaction blocks are visible, covering my sensitive personal information while leaving the glaring evidence of the crime fully exposed. I am a forensic accountant, Sarah, I say calmly into the microphone. My voice cuts through her hysterical shrieks like a scalpel. I do not make accusations. I bring receipts. The room falls dead silent again. The word receipts lands with devastating impact. In this community of investors and businessmen, documentation is the ultimate authority. The sight of the stamped affidavits destroys Sarah's narrative of mental instability in an instant. A crazy person does not bring certified federal banking documents to a gala. A crazy person does not speak with such chilling clinical precision. My father realizes the battle is lost. He sees the thick stack of evidence in my hand and recognizes the format of the legal filings. He knows I have already traced the IP addresses. He knows I have the custodial trust records. He looks at me, and for the first time in 32 years, the absolute certainty of his patriarchal authority crumbles. He is no longer the titan of Utah real estate. He is a man caught in a lie he cannot buy his way out of. "What do you want, Letitia?" he asks, his voice a defeated rasp. He speaks away from the microphone, hoping to negotiate a surrender before the damage becomes irreversible. "Tell me your price. We can handle this quietly." He still believes he can purchase my silence. He assumes everyone has a number, and he is frantically trying to calculate mine. He thinks I am staging this public confrontation merely to increase my leverage for a private settlement. He fundamentally misunderstands the nature of my presence here tonight. "I do not want your money, Dad," I reply, my voice still amplified for the entire room to hear. "You already spent it all trying to keep Sarah's failing business afloat. You mortgaged my identity to protect your precious brand." I lower the documents but keep them firmly in my grip. "You brought me here to force my compliance," I continue. You thought you could use these people, these investors and friends, to bully me into submission. You assumed I was still the invisible daughter who would quietly clean up your messes to avoid embarrassing the family. I take a slow, deliberate step toward the edge of the stage, looking directly down at Sarah and my mother. I am not the invisible daughter anymore, I declare. I am the auditor, and your books are closed. I turn back to my father. He stands frozen, his chest heaving, his eyes darting wildly around the room, searching for an exit that does not exist. He is trapped on the very stage he built to celebrate his legacy. He has provided the audience for his own execution. The silence in the ballroom stretches thick with the realization of his monumental fall from grace. But I am not finished. The evidence I hold in my hand is only the beginning of the reckoning. The true devastation is about to be delivered not from the stage, but from the shadows of the banquet hall. I lower the documents in my hand slightly, but keep my posture rigid and unyielding. The entire ballroom holds its collective breath, waiting for my father's next frantic move. He murmurs away from the microphone, offering me private accounts and quiet compromises, trying to purchase a retreat. I do not acknowledge his desperate bargaining. Instead, I lift my gaze over the sea of stunned, affluent guests and look directly toward the carved wooden doors at the far end of the hall. I give a single deliberate nod. From the deep shadows of the arched entryway, Harrison Cole steps forward. He moves with the lethal, unhurried grace of a corporate predator who has successfully cornered its prey. He wears a bespoke charcoal suit that contrasts sharply with the festive tuxedos surrounding him. Beside him, the catering waiter, who had been inconspicuously pouring sparkling water near the ice sculptures, sets down his silver tray. This is Elias, our private process server. Elias unbuttons his uniform vest, revealing a crisp white dress shirt underneath. Together they walk down the center aisle carrying a towering stack of thick sealed manila envelopes. Harrison does not distribute the envelopes randomly. We spent hours in his downtown office profiling this specific guest list. He targets the apex predators of the Salt Lake City commercial real estate market. He approaches a distinguished man sitting at table 4, the primary venture capitalist, who underwrites my father's largest developments. Harrison places a heavy envelope directly onto the starched white linen next to the man's crystal goblet. Elias mirrors the action at table 7, handing a dossier to the chairman of the regional brokerage board. They move with synchronized clinical efficiency, identifying the exact individuals whose trust and capital Richard relies upon to sustain his wealth and his power. I raise the microphone to my lips once more. My voice cuts through the rising murmur of confusion spreading across the banquet tables. Those envelopes contain the forensic audit of the forged commercial loan, I announce. The state-of-the-art sound system carries my words into every corner of the vast space, ensuring no one can feign ignorance. Inside those files, you will find the verified federal IP tracking data, pinpointing the digital signature directly to my father's executive office suite. You will also find the comprehensive financial ledgers, detailing how the stolen trust capital was funneled into personal luxury accounts to subsidize a failing retail business. And on the very last page, you will find the formal police report for identity theft and grand larceny, which my legal counsel filed yesterday afternoon. The grand ballroom descends into chaotic muttering. The sophisticated restraint of Utah high society shatters. I watch from the elevated stage as wealthy developers tear open the seals. I hear the distinct sound of thick paper shuffling echoing beneath the crystal chandeliers. These are men and women who build their fortunes on risk assessment and fiduciary reliability. They know exactly how to read a financial audit. I watch their eyes scan the printed IP logs and the bank affidavits. I see their expressions morph from polite confusion to profound, unvarnished horror. The realization hits them like a physical blow. The man they trusted with their investment capital, the patriarch they are honoring tonight, is a reckless felon who mortgaged his own daughter's identity to cover a retail debt. At the center table, Sarah's husband David leans over the shoulder of a prominent investor to read the distributed documents. David is a junior partner at a competing firm, a man whose own career relies entirely on maintaining an immaculate public image. As he registers the implications of his wife's boutique being listed as the primary beneficiary of the stolen funds, all the color drains from his face. He realizes he is legally tethered to a woman under federal investigation. He looks at Sarah with an expression of pure revulsion. She reaches a trembling hand out toward his arm, but he recoils, stepping away from her, as if she carries a dangerous contagion. The collapse of the social facade is too much for my mother to bear. Patricia realizes the meticulously curated brand she spent 4 decades constructing is evaporating in real time right in front of her most influential peers. She bursts into loud theatrical tears, abandoning her poised matriarch persona. Her knees buckle and she falls heavily back into her dining chair. The expensive string of pearls around her neck rattles against the edge of the table. "How could you do this to us?" she wails, her voice cracking with indignation and terror. She points a shaking finger at me, standing above her on the stage. "You are destroying the family." I look down at the woman who raised me, the woman who spent her life prioritizing pristine holiday photos over my basic well-being. I search my chest for a flicker of grief or guilt. I search for the desperate child who always craved her mother's approval. I find nothing but cold clinical closure. I do not raise my voice. I speak with the terrifying calm of an auditor who has finished reconciling a devastating deficit. "You destroyed the family, Mom." I say the microphone catching the icy finality in my tone. "I am just reading the autopsy report." Patricia buries her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Sarah is frozen, watching her husband back away toward the venue exit without saying a single word of comfort. But the true devastation belongs to my father. Richard stands merely 3 feet away from me, trapped in the harsh glare of the spotlight. He is entirely paralyzed. The towering, commanding broker is reduced to a hollow shell. He watches his most lucrative investors, the men he courted and entertained for decades, close the manila folders with resounding finality. The venture capitalist from Table 4 stands up, drops his linen napkin onto his plate, and turns his back on the stage. He does not offer a polite farewell. He does not seek an explanation. He simply walks toward the coat check. A second board member follows suit, then a third. The mass exodus begins. The elite tier of the local market, the individuals who dictate the flow of commercial wealth, quietly and ruthlessly sever their ties. They abandon their half-eaten catered dinners and their expensive vintage wine. They walk past the elaborate floral centerpieces and the melting ice sculptures, retreating toward the grand double doors in a steady, silent stream. Richard watches them leave. His mouth hangs slightly open, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. He reaches a shaking hand out toward the retreating back of a longtime colleague, a man he has known for 20 years. His hand grasps nothing but empty air. The colleague does not even break his stride. My father looks out at the rapidly emptying room, and the staggering reality of his situation crushes the remaining defiance from his posture. His extensive empire, built on handshake agreements and a pristine reputation, is collapsing before his very eyes. The destruction is swift, absolute, and inescapable. It takes exactly 4 minutes for the ballroom to empty its most powerful occupants. In that agonizing span of time, Richard realizes the devastating irony of his brilliant social strategy. He wanted to use this elite gathering to spring a trap and force my submission. But instead, he provided the ultimate audience for his own public execution. The carefully constructed ecosystem of the anniversary gala shatters with the rapid, unsentimental efficiency of a collapsing corporate merger. The mass exodus of my father's premier investors triggers a cascading panic among the remaining guests. The room is no longer a celebration of marital longevity. It has transformed into a containment zone for a highly infectious financial scandal. Near the center of the dance floor, Sarah's husband David is experiencing a catastrophic realization. He has spent the last 10 minutes poring over the contents of the manila envelope Elias handed him. David is a junior partner at a competing commercial real estate firm. His entire career trajectory is predicated on a spotless fiduciary record and unassailable ethical boundaries. He reads the detailed tracing of the stolen loan disbursements, watching the capital flow directly from my forged identity into the registered LLC of his wife's boutique. He understands the brutal reality of Utah marital property laws. By intertwining her fraudulent business accounts with their shared personal finances, Sarah has legally implicated him in a massive federal scheme. The sheer magnitude of his exposure hits him, causing his complexion to turn a sickly grayish white. A thin sheen of cold sweat breaks out across his forehead. He drops the heavy dossier onto the nearest cocktail table, the document spilling out over a discarded silk napkin. Sarah reaches for him, her face contorted with desperate, tearful panic. "David, please," she begs, her voice cracking under the strain of her collapsing social facade. "Let me explain. We can fix this. We just need to talk to my father." David recoils from her touch, violently jerking his arm out of her grasp. His eyes are wide with an expression of profound revulsion, mirroring the look of a man who has just discovered he has been sharing a bed with a venomous snake. "There is no fixing this. Sarah," he snarls, his voice low and vibrating with contained fury. "You dragged my name into a federal indictment. I am done." He does not offer her another glance. He turns on his heel and strides rapidly toward the grand double doors, leaving his wife standing alone in the center of the room. Sarah sinks to her knees, the heavy beaded fabric of her custom gown pooling around her on the polished hardwood floor. She buries her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, but no one rushes to comfort the golden child. The surrounding guests carefully step around her, actively avoiding eye contact, terrified that any association with her might stain their own reputations. At the front table, my mother Patricia remains slumped in her chair. She is staring blankly at the empty champagne flutes, her perfect posture entirely ruined. The matriarch, who spent 4 decades prioritizing country club memberships and flawless holiday photos over her daughter's well-being, is now forced to sit in the ruins of her own creation. She is witnessing the instantaneous evaporation of her social currency. She will never host another charity luncheon. She will never be invited to another elite ski resort gala. The women she spent her life trying to impress are currently fleeing the ballroom, whispering about her husband's imminent arrest. On the stage, my father, Richard Mark, stands completely alone. The towering, authoritative broker is gone. In his place is a hollow, diminished man, stripped of the power and prestige he wielded, like a weapon for his entire adult life. He watches the last of his influential colleagues exit the venue, leaving behind a sea of abandoned tables and uneaten catered meals. The string quartet packed up their instruments and slipped out the side door minutes ago, sensing the volatile shift in the atmosphere. Richard slowly turns his head to look at me. His eyes are wide, carrying a mixture of stark terror and profound disbelief. He cannot fathom that the quiet, invisible daughter he used as an emotional and financial footstool possessed the strategic capacity to dismantle his empire. He realizes that by attempting to force my public submission, he inadvertently provided the perfect stage for his own unmasking. I step closer to him, stopping just outside of his physical reach. I lower the microphone to my side, ensuring our final exchange remains private. My voice is soft, carrying the clinical detachment of a forensic auditor delivering a terminal assessment. "You will go to federal prison for this, Dad," I tell him, the words slicing cleanly through the remaining ambient noise of the ballroom. "You forged my signature to secure a commercial note, and you illegally leveraged a custodial trust. The evidence is irrefutable, and it is already in the hands of the authorities." He opens his mouth to speak, perhaps to offer another hollow threat or a desperate plea for clemency, but no sound emerges. His vocal cords seem paralyzed by the overwhelming weight of his circumstances. "And even if you manage to plea bargain your way into a minimum security facility," I continue, holding his terrified gaze, "there is not a single country club or boardroom in the state of Utah that will ever let you through their doors again. Your legacy is officially bankrupt." I do not wait for a response. There is nothing left for him to say that could possibly alter the trajectory of his ruined life. I turn away from him, severing the eye contact that defined my childhood anxiety. I spot a stunned catering waiter standing near the edge of the stage, holding a tray of empty glasses. I casually hand him the microphone. I walk down the 3 carpeted steps, the emerald silk of my gown trailing smoothly behind me. I do not look back at my mother sobbing in her chair, or my sister kneeling on the dance floor. I navigate the empty spaces between the abandoned banquet tables, making my way toward the exit. The few remaining guests part like the Red Sea, allowing me to pass unhindered. They look at me with a new expression, one devoid of pity or condescension. They look at me with raw, unadulterated respect. I push through the heavy wooden doors of the grand ballroom and walk down the carpeted corridor. I bypass the bustling coat check where panicked attendees are frantically retrieving their belongings. I push through the main entrance of the luxury resort, stepping out under the grand portico. The crisp, freezing mountain air hits my face, a sharp, bracing contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the gala. The sky above Park City is clear, vast, and scattered with brilliant winter stars. I take a slow, deep breath, pulling the frigid oxygen deep into my lungs. For the first time in 32 years, my chest feels completely unburdened. The chronic, invisible weight of my family's toxic expectations, the relentless demand to shrink myself to accommodate their fragile egos, has entirely vanished. I have successfully excised the cancer from my life, using their own hubris as the scalpel. I hand my ticket to the valet attendant. He retrieves my modest, reliable sedan, pulling it up behind a line of idling luxury SUVs. I offer him a generous cash tip, slide into the driver's seat, and start the engine. I merge onto the winding canyon road, beginning the descent back down to the Salt Lake Valley. The darkness outside the vehicle feels protective rather than isolating. I drive in silence, reflecting on the meticulous execution of the strategy Harrison Cole and I designed. We did not merely expose a fraud, we dismantled a generational system of abuse. The sun rises the next morning, casting a brilliant golden light across the Wasatch Range. It illuminates a city waking up to a seismic shift in its social hierarchy. For me, it is not just the dawn of a new day free from familial manipulation. It marks the beginning of a relentless barrage of legal indictments that will permanently alter the landscape of Utah commercial real estate. The trap has been sprung, the evidence deployed, and the authorities are already moving in to collect the remains. The weeks following the anniversary gala unfold with a swift, relentless momentum. When you introduce undeniable forensic evidence into the federal banking system, the resulting machinery moves with an efficiency that no amount of social maneuvering can halt. The morning after I walked out of the luxury ski resort, the commercial lender officially escalated their internal fraud inquiry into a formal criminal referral. Harrison Cole predicted the timeline with chilling accuracy. Within 14 days, the federal authorities secure a grand jury indictment against my father. Richard Mark, the once untouchable titan of Utah commercial real estate, is formally charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. The arrest does not happen in the shadows. Federal agents arrive at his downtown penthouse suite during normal business hours. The sight of the powerful broker being escorted out of his glass-enclosed office building by law enforcement sends shockwaves through the local financial sector. The professional fallout is instantaneous. The Utah Real Estate Commission convenes an emergency disciplinary hearing and permanently revokes his broker's license. His name is systematically stripped from the corporate registry. The investment partners who fled the ballroom that night act quickly to sever all remaining ties, liquidating their joint ventures and distancing their portfolios from the toxic blast radius of his crimes. His 40-year empire, a legacy built on firm handshakes and pristine community standing, evaporates. Richard is left facing years of grueling litigation, severe financial restitution, and the very real prospect of a lengthy federal prison sentence. My sister Sarah experiences a parallel destruction. The commercial loan that artificially sustained her lifestyle boutique is recalled in full. Without the stolen capital masking her insolvency, the business collapses in a matter of days. Bank-appointed liquidators seize her storefront in downtown Salt Lake City. The locks are changed. Neon foreclosure notices are taped to the glass windows, blocking the view of the imported linen throws and artisanal candles. Her curated inventory is auctioned off to satisfy a fraction of her outstanding vendor judgments. But the financial ruin is only a fraction of her punishment. Her husband David initiates divorce proceedings the very same week, minimizing his own legal and financial exposure. He files the paperwork prioritizing his career and his unblemished reputation over their marriage. Sarah is suddenly left without her storefront, without her wealthy spouse, and without the stolen funds that fueled her arrogance. She plummets from the apex of local high society to the status of a social pariah. The women she once drank champagne with at elite charity luncheons now deliberately cross the street to avoid her. She learns the harsh, unforgiving lesson that in a community obsessed with flawless appearances, a tarnished brand is an unforgivable sin. She becomes the ultimate cautionary tale whispered about over manicured country club tables. My mother, Patricia, is forced to endure the darkest reality of all. She sits alone in the sprawling, vaulted living room of her Park City chalet, surrounded by the expensive artifacts of a life that no longer exists. The invitations to the exclusive galas and the neighborhood fundraising boards dry up entirely. Her phone stops ringing. The pristine public image she spent 4 decades fiercely protecting, prioritizing it above the basic well-being of her youngest daughter, is irreversibly shattered. She traded my loyalty for a fragile illusion, and now she is left holding nothing but the shattered pieces. I do not monitor their daily struggles. I do not track their court dates or read the local business journals chronicling their demise. I simply close the ledger on that chapter of my life. Their ruin is the natural, unyielding consequence of their own actions. I am no longer focused on their ashes. I am focused entirely on my own foundation. Today, my life looks drastically different. I stand in the center of my own bright modern office space in a thriving district of Salt Lake City. The frosted glass door bears the sleek minimalist logo of my newly established independent firm, Mark Forensic Consulting. I retained my surname not out of loyalty to the people who abused it, but as a quiet daily reminder that I reclaimed my identity from the very hands that tried to mortgage it. I set my own billable rates. I select my own clients. I specialize in uncovering corporate embezzlement and dismantling elaborate financial fraud. The local business community respects my meticulous precision and my unwavering ethical standards. I no longer perform complex tax reconciliations for free in the shadows. Every hour of my expertise is compensated at a premium, and my professional reputation is built on undeniable merit rather than inherited privilege. My personal life has transformed with equal profoundness. I spend my weekends surrounded by a chosen family of individuals who value my presence. My closest friend Rachel sits across from my dining table on Sunday evenings, pouring wine and sharing genuine, uncalculated laughter. We do not demand blind obedience from one another. We do not enforce rigid hierarchies. We simply show up. I have learned that a true support system does not require you to shrink yourself to fit into a designated mold. True kinship celebrates your growth. If you are listening to this story right now, I want to step away from the timeline and speak directly to you. I know there are people sitting in their cars, lying awake in their beds, or hiding in quiet rooms feeling the crushing, suffocating weight of a toxic family dynamic. I know exactly how it feels to be the designated scapegoat. I know the unique, agonizing pain of watching the people who are supposed to love you prioritize an illusion over your survival. If you are being used to prop up someone else's golden pedestal, if you are treated as an invisible utility, expected to carry the heavy boulders while another sibling is handed the trophies, hear me now. Setting a hard boundary is not a betrayal. Refusing to be financially or emotionally exploited is not a sign of a mental breakdown. Your worth is not determined by people who possess a vested interest in remaining blind to it. You do not owe anyone your silence to keep their secrets comfortable. You do not owe your abusers a polite smile while they dismantle your future. The anxiety you feel, the desperate yearning to finally earn their approval, is a manufactured response designed to keep you compliant. The moment you recognize the mechanics of their manipulation, the moment you stop playing their rigged game, you reclaim your power. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to protect your assets, your peace of mind, and your sanity. You are allowed to stop subsidizing the lies of the people who hurt you. Healing begins the second you realize that their inability to value you is a reflection of their own brokenness, not a measure of your inadequacy. I spent 32 years believing that if I just worked hard enough, if I just solved enough of their problems, I would eventually earn a seat at their table. I had to learn the hardest way possible that the table was built on a foundation of fraud. I had to walk out into the freezing mountain air and build my own table from scratch. True power is rarely loud. It does not require hysterical shouting in a crowded ballroom or frantic whisper campaigns behind closed doors. True power is cold, clear, and forensic. It is the ability to observe the dysfunction, to gather your strength, and to hold the truth quietly until the perfect, undeniable moment arrives to deploy it. Let them spin their narratives. Let them prioritize their pristine facades. Let them build their towering, glittering houses of cards. You do not have to knock the structure down with your own hands. You just have to stand your ground, protect your peace, and wait. Because when a foundation is built entirely on lies, gravity will always do the heavy lifting for you. Let them build their houses of cards. All you need is a match.
We often picture the American dream as a tangible destination. We imagine a sprawling home nestled in a picturesque neighborhood, 2 cars in the driveway, and a glossy holiday photo card sent out to 500 acquaintances. Yet beneath this polished veneer, a different kind of reality often simmers. The story of Letitia Mark is more than a thrilling legal drama. It is a profound reflection on the ego, the shadows of modern parenting, and the dangerous illusions we build to protect our pride. Looking at this narrative through a lens of deep observation, we see a striking portrait of what happens when a family prioritizes its brand over its soul. It is a cautionary tale about the blindness that infects households when the pursuit of status eclipses the fundamental duty of love. In many affluent communities, much like the elite circles of Utah depicted in the story, the value of a family is frequently measured by superficial metrics. Society encourages us to judge success by designer labels, exclusive ski trips, and the curated perfection of social media feeds. This relentless pressure creates a pervasive ignorance, a spiritual blindness to what actually matters. When parents lack the wisdom to see beyond societal expectations, they begin to view their children not as human beings, but as instruments to serve their own egos. Letitia's father committed federal fraud and mortgaged his youngest daughter's identity for one singular reason: to preserve a flawless public facade. He chose the illusion of success over the reality of his child's future. The lesson here requires a fundamental shift in perspective. A genuine family is not constructed on lies or outward splendor. It is built on the quiet, unglamorous foundation of truth. Parents must find the courage to remove the perfect mask. It is far better to raise an ordinary, honest family than to reign over an empire built on a house of cards. The pursuit of prestige is an endless treadmill. It demands constant sacrifices, and too often the casualty is the well-being of the most vulnerable child in the room. This brings us to the core of parental ethics: unconditional love and fairness. The tragedy of the Mark family did not begin with a forged bank loan. It began decades earlier with the insidious practice of favoritism. Pitting a favored child against a scapegoat is a quiet devastation that plays out in living rooms across the country. Letitia's parents extracted her time, her labor, and eventually her financial security to subsidize Sarah's vanity. They justified this exploitation by labeling it family sacrifice. But true love does not calculate returns, and it does not discriminate. Children arrive in our lives as independent souls needing guidance and nourishment. They are not assets to be drained or props to be positioned for a photograph. Raising children with emotional awareness means examining your own heart. Do you love your child because their choices nourish their own growth, or because their achievements reflect well on your status. A parent must learn to honor the core value of each child, even when that child chooses a path that diverges from the family's expected aesthetic. The quiet child, the pragmatic child, the child who prefers ledgers to galas, they are equally deserving of a seat at the table. Beyond fairness, parenting requires an immense amount of grit and moral stamina. It demands the willpower to face failure, both our children's and our own. When Sarah's boutique began to hemorrhage money, her parents faced a crucial juncture. They could have used the moment to teach accountability, guiding her through the difficult process of closing a failed business and learning from the loss. Instead, they chose deception. They utilized illicit maneuvers to hide her mistakes, shielding her from reality. Dodging accountability is an expression of weakness. Covering up a flaw only ensures that the eventual collapse will be devastating. The legal ruin and social exile they ultimately suffered were the natural consequences of the seeds they chose to plant. True parental courage is not just about shielding a child from external hardships. The highest form of courage is the willingness to confront the darkness within ourselves. It is the bravery to accept a family's imperfections, the strength to say no to unreasonable demands, and the humility to admit when we are wrong. Letitia's response to this lifelong betrayal offers a masterclass in emotional maturity and the necessity of boundaries. She did not act out of unbridled rage. She did not scream, throw insults, or seek vengeance merely for the sake of inflicting pain. She moved with stillness, clarity, and precision. She utilized the law and the undeniable truth to sever a toxic bond. Her actions serve as a stark warning to parents everywhere. The title of mother or father is not a lifetime immunity card against accountability. If parents sow seeds of toxicity, a child possessing wisdom and self-respect will eventually choose to walk away. They will leave to protect their own peace, prioritizing their healing over a hollow sense of familial duty. True happiness is not found in how strangers view your family from the outside. It is found in how the members of your family feel when they sit together at the dinner table. To foster a better life, we must look inward. We must detach from the relentless pursuit of prestige. We must love our children fairly, respecting their individual boundaries. We must embrace honesty, teaching responsibility, rather than deploying smoke and mirrors to hide our flaws. Only when parents light their own torches of self-awareness will they avoid burning down the futures of the children they were meant to guide. If you found value in these reflections, and if Letitia's journey sparked a realization about your own relationships, please subscribe and follow our channel, Eva Tells Stories. We explore the hidden dynamics of family, the silent battles we fight, and the eventual dawn of truth. Join our community as we navigate the complex, often messy reality of what it means to be human. As you step away from this story and return to the rhythm of your own life, look closely at the walls around you. Listen to the silence in your living room. We all write the legacy of our families every single day in the smallest of choices, in the words we say and the words we withhold. The question remains when the lights go out and the guests go home. What kind of foundation are you really standing on? Is it solid ground, or is it just another beautiful, fragile illusion waiting for the wind?